You've heard of the strange sounds they recorded beneath the Great Pyramid, right? Low-frequency hums, barely perceptible vibrations that shouldn't have been there. Scientists dismiss them as natural, maybe tectonic, maybe just interference. But what if I told you those sounds weren't geological at all? What if I told you they were something else, something that had been buried and hidden away for millennia? Sounds designed to be ignored. Because what we found underneath, well, it wasn't supposed to be found. I know you won't believe me at first. But what if I told you the pyramids aren't what you think they are? The alignment with the stars, the strange resonance chambers, the precise engineering, it's all been staring us in the face. We've been looking at it wrong for centuries. The ancient Egyptians didn't build the pyramids for tombs or as mere monuments to their kings. They were something else, something much older and far more advanced than we've ever imagined. And I'm not the first to say this, I've seen the writings. But no one's put it together. Until now. That's why I'm recording this. I don't have much time. They're looking for me. The people who control this truth, the ones who've kept it buried, they don't want you to know what I found. I'm not asking you to believe me yet, but by the end of this, you'll understand. And once you do, you'll realize why I can't stop. I've been an archaeologist for over 20 years, dedicated my life to understanding ancient Egypt, its mysteries, its culture. I've seen strange things before, artifacts, inscriptions that didn't fit neatly into the historical timeline. But nothing prepared me for what my team uncovered in that chamber beneath the Great Pyramid last year. Nothing. We were there on a routine dig, sponsored by one of the universities. Professor Grant Lewis, my mentor, had theorized that the pyramid's substructure might hold some overlooked burial goods, maybe even a hidden tomb. But what we found wasn't a tomb. It wasn't anything we could have expected. There was a passage. A narrow, crumbling shaft sealed off for thousands of years. It led deeper than the known maps of the pyramid had ever suggested, beyond the bedrock. That's when we found the chamber. The air was different there, cooler still, like stepping into another time. The walls were covered in hieroglyphs, but they weren't just ordinary carvings. They seemed rushed, as if whoever had inscribed them was racing against time. And then there were the symbols, geometric patterns, star-like formations we couldn't identify, not even with modern references. At first, none of it made sense. The hieroglyphs talked about visitors from the sky, beings that came from the stars, but these weren't the typical mythological gods we all know about. These were described as real, physical beings, ones who interacted with the rulers of Egypt, offering them knowledge in exchange for something. What that something was, well, the inscriptions were fragmented, almost intentionally obscured. Professor Lewis didn't believe it at first. He said it had to be some lost religious myth, nothing more. But I saw the fear in his eyes. He knew something wasn't right. The more we translated, the more I began to understand that this wasn't a myth at all, it was a warning. We were told not to disturb the chamber. It was said the secrets buried there were never meant for human eyes again. The stars would one day return to claim what was theirs. That's what the text said. I'll never forget it. They will return, and with them, judgment. The alignment of the pyramids with Orion, the ancient stories of gods descending from the heavens, it all began to make terrifying sense. But here's the thing, someone else already knew. As soon as we started our excavation, strange things began happening. My notes would go missing, data was wiped from our computers. We were being watched. The day after we found the chamber, Professor Lewis wanted to make a public announcement, but before he could, he had a sudden heart attack. That's what the report said. Healthy one day, dead the next. No warning. The rest of the team left after that, terrified. They wouldn't talk about what we found. They didn't want to end up like him. I couldn't leave it alone. I went back, alone, and I spent nights poring over the photographs of the inscriptions. That's when I started receiving messages, warnings to stop. At first, I thought it was paranoia. Maybe it was just grief from losing Lewis. But then they came to my door. They weren't police, or any officials I could recognize. Just men in black suits, asking about my research. Too many questions. Too much interest in what I was doing alone. It wasn't long before I realized the scale of what I was dealing with. There's a group, call them what you want, a syndicate, a secret organization, people who control information about alien contact. They've known about it for centuries. And what we found under the Great Pyramid? It was their worst nightmare. Proof. I barely escaped Cairo that night. I've been on the run ever since, moving from place to place, trying to stay one step ahead. But they're closing in. They always are. I'm recording this now because I don't know how much longer I can keep running. The last thing I found before they cut me off, before they wiped my research, was a set of coordinates. Coordinates that shouldn't exist. A location out in the middle of the Sahara. Something that's been buried for even longer than the pyramids themselves. I'm going there next. But the closer I get, the stranger things become. I spent weeks poring over the inscriptions, their meanings slowly unraveling in my mind like the uncoiling of a forgotten nightmare. The hieroglyphs weren't like anything I had seen before. Sure, they had the familiar shapes, the gods, the stars, the symbols of kings, but there was something else. A pattern, a strange alignment with celestial bodies. It kept pointing back to one place, the constellation Orion. It wasn't just about the pyramids being aligned with the stars. Everyone knew that already. It was what the stars represented. The more I translated, the more uneasy I became. These weren't myths. They were detailed accounts of contact with beings that weren't human. Not gods, as we've been led to believe, but something else. The carvings referred to them as the Watchers, entities who came from the heavens, from a place far beyond our reach. The texts described a time when these beings descended from Orion, gifting the Egyptians with knowledge far beyond their time. The pyramids, it seemed, were part of a grander plan, a kind of communication device, not just with the stars but with those who lived among them. I could feel the weight of the discovery crushing me. This was more than history, more than archaeology. This was the kind of thing that could change everything. I debated telling the world, laying out what I had found, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear. Fear of being ridiculed, fear of being discredited. But there was something more, something deeper. A warning. Hidden in the text, amidst the star maps and celestial references, was a dire message. The carvings spoke of judgment, of catastrophic consequences if humanity learned the full extent of the Watchers' influence. The ancient Egyptians had been given a choice, knowledge in exchange for silence. They accepted, leaving behind clues only for those who dared to look deeper. And I had looked too deep. Professor Lewis, before he died, had helped me decode parts of the scripture. I remember how he stared at the pages in disbelief, his skepticism slowly giving way to something darker. "Tom," he'd said, his voice barely a whisper, "this isn't some legend. These aren't gods they're talking about. This is real." But he had warned me, too. Maybe we should leave it alone. Some things were never meant to be uncovered. That was the last time I saw him alive. A heart attack, they said. But I knew better. He was fine that morning. And by nightfall, he was gone. The further I delved into the text, the more I started seeing connections. The Watchers weren't just visitors. They had been here before, long before the pyramids. And they hadn't left. There was a passage I found, buried in the corner of one wall, nearly illegible due to time's erosion. It spoke of the return, when the stars would align once again and the Watchers would come back to claim what was theirs. I had no idea what they were referring to, but the words sent chills down my spine. I couldn't stop thinking about what that meant. Were they coming back? And if so, what did they want? What did they leave behind? The pyramids were their message to us, but what were they trying to say? I began to notice strange things around me. My computer would glitch, files would disappear, and on one occasion, entire sections of my notes were missing. Someone was watching me, just like the Watchers had been watching humanity all those years ago. One night, I came home to find my front door slightly ajar. My heart pounded in my chest as I stepped inside, knowing full well what I would find. My place had been torn apart. Papers scattered, drawers emptied, personal items overturned. They weren't subtle. Whoever had come through wasn't just looking for something, they were sending a message. Stop. I knew it was the Syndicate. I had heard whispers about them in the academic circles, those who control the flow of information, those who keep the truth buried deep under layers of lies. They were the ones who erased history, who kept people like me silent. The more I uncovered, the more dangerous it became. But I couldn't stop. The hieroglyphs, the symbols, the warnings, it was all leading somewhere. And then I found it. A set of coordinates, etched into the stone alongside the prophecy of the Watcher's return. It was a location far out in the Sahara, where nothing should exist. But the carvings were clear. Beneath the sands it waits, the text had said. Waits for what, I didn't know. But it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. I packed my things that night, moving what little I had left into a backpack. I had to go. I had to see it for myself. Whatever was buried there, whatever the Watchers had left behind, it had been hidden for a reason. But now, I had to find out why. Before I left, I made one last call to a contact I trusted, someone who could help me get out of the country unnoticed. But as the phone rang, something strange happened. The lights in my apartment flickered, and the sound of static filled the room. The line went dead. I tried again, but nothing. That's when I heard it. A low, almost imperceptible hum. It was faint, but unmistakable. It was the same sound they recorded beneath the Great Pyramid, the one that had been dismissed as interference. But it wasn't interference. It was something much worse. The hum was louder now, more distinct. It felt like it was pressing in on me from all sides, vibrating through my chest. My apartment was dark, the air thick with the kind of tension that makes your skin crawl. I knew what was coming. They had found me. The Syndicate. I had pushed too far, and now they were closing in. I grabbed my bag, stuffing the last of my notes into it, and bolted out the back door. The streets were quiet, almost unnaturally so. I scanned every shadow, every corner, expecting to see one of their agents lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. They weren't the kind of people who made themselves known. You never saw them coming, until it was too late. The messages had started a week earlier. At first, they were subtle, anonymous emails, strange phone calls where no one spoke but you could feel someone on the other end, listening. Then, they became more direct. A simple text message on my phone. Stop digging. No signature, no trace. But the implication was clear. I knew too much, and they were giving me a final warning. I didn't listen. How could I? What I had found was bigger than any of us. The truth behind the pyramids, the Watchers, the alignment with Orion, it wasn't just history. It was a part of something much larger, something that had been hidden for centuries, millennia even. And the Syndicate knew about it. They had known for a long time. My work, my research, had merely brought it back into the light, and now they were doing everything they could to snuff it out. I had been planning to meet with Professor Lewis that day, to share everything I had uncovered. He was the only person I trusted, the only one who might have helped me figure out what to do next. But he never showed. I waited at our usual cafe for hours, trying to call him. No response. Later that night, I saw the news, a freak accident, they said. His car had veered off the road, straight into a ditch. No foul play suspected. Of course not. They were good at covering their tracks. That's when I knew. It wasn't paranoia anymore. They were coming for me, just like they had for Lewis. I couldn't go back to my apartment. I couldn't call anyone. They were watching everything. So I disappeared. I went underground, cut all ties with my old life. I had no choice. I wasn't safe anymore, not if they were willing to kill to keep their secrets buried. Everywhere I went, I felt their eyes on me. It wasn't just the men in suits who occasionally seemed to be following me on the street. It was the devices, the technology around me. My phone, my laptop, even the public Wi-Fi connections, it all started malfunctioning. Calls would drop mid-conversation, text messages would vanish before my eyes, and entire chunks of my research were wiped clean from my drives. They had to be using some kind of advanced tech, something far beyond what I'd ever seen. One night, I was holed up in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, trying to reach out to a journalist I knew, a guy who specialized in conspiracy theories and had a reputation for getting close to the truth. I thought he might help me get the word out, tell the world what I'd found. But as soon as I connected the call, the room went dark. The lights flickered once, then cut out completely. The hum returned, that same low-frequency drone I had heard beneath the pyramid. My phone screen glitched, the call cutting off as if it had been severed by something deliberate. Panic set in. I grabbed my bag and ran for the door, only to find it jammed. I yanked at the handle, heart pounding in my ears. Someone was coming. I could feel it. The air outside had that thick, electric charge, like a storm was about to break, but the sky was clear. I didn't wait to find out what was on the other side. I kicked the door open and sprinted out into the night. They were hunting me. Not just men, no, something else was helping them. Something that made the air feel wrong, that made technology fail at the worst possible moments. I'd seen too much, and now they were making sure I wouldn't be able to share it with anyone. I kept moving, changing locations every few hours, staying off the grid as best I could. But it was getting harder. No matter where I went, no matter how careful I was, they always seemed to be a step ahead. The hum would follow me, growing louder the closer they got. It was like they were using it to track me, a signal only they could tune into. My paranoia grew with every passing day. I stopped sleeping. I couldn't eat. Every creak of a floorboard, every flicker of a light bulb sent me into a cold sweat. The syndicate wasn't going to stop. They'd killed Lewis, and they wouldn't hesitate to do the same to me if it meant keeping the truth buried. I started to question everything. Was this really about the pyramids? Or was there something more, something the Watchers had left behind that the syndicate was trying to protect? I thought back to the coordinates I had found etched in the stone. A remote location in the Sahara, far from any known sites. It didn't make sense. Why would ancient Egyptians, or whoever had carved those symbols, leave a map to a place no one had ever heard of? But it was my only lead. If I wanted to survive, if I wanted to know why they were chasing me, I had to follow it. I didn't know what I would find out there, buried beneath the sands, but I had a feeling it was the key to everything. That night, as I prepared to head out into the desert, I heard the hum again. This time, it wasn't faint. It was deafening, vibrating through the walls, rattling the windows. And then, out of nowhere, my phone lit up with a single message. No number. Just 3 words. You're too late. I thought I was being careful. Every move I made, every step toward the coordinates, I doubled back, erased my trail. But they were always ahead of me. The syndicate knew I would come here. They had been waiting. It was supposed to be a meeting. A fellow archaeologist, someone I had worked with years ago, reached out. He claimed to have information, something that could tie all of this together. I didn't trust him completely, but I was running out of options. If there was a chance he knew more about the Watchers and the strange connections we had found, I had to take it. The coordinates led to an abandoned airfield deep in the desert. A single hangar stood in the distance, its rusted metal structure half buried in the sand. The silence was absolute. No wind, no movement. Just that eerie, oppressive quiet that feels too thick, too unnatural. I approached cautiously, my senses on edge, eyes scanning every shadow, every crack in the landscape. But the moment I stepped inside the hangar, I knew I had made a mistake. It was empty, except for a single chair in the center of the room. No sign of my contact. No sign of life at all. And then I heard it, the hum. It started low, barely noticeable, but it grew quickly, filling the space like the sound of an approaching storm. Before I could react, they were on me. 3 men, dressed in black, moved out of the shadows, silent, methodical. One of them grabbed me, slamming me down into the chair. I struggled, but it was useless. A needle plunged into my arm, and the world around me blurred, the edges of my vision darkening until everything faded to black. When I woke up, I was underground. Cold metal walls, dim lights flickering above. The hum was still there, vibrating through the walls like a living thing. I was restrained, my arms and legs bound to a metal chair, and across from me stood a man I recognized only from whispers, the leader of the syndicate. He looked older than I had imagined, his face lined with years of hidden knowledge, but there was something in his eyes, something that spoke of power beyond what I could comprehend. He didn't say anything at first, just watched me as I regained consciousness, as if waiting for me to understand the gravity of the situation. "You've been busy, Dr. Kane," he finally said, his voice calm, almost casual. "Too busy for your own good." I didn't respond. My mind was racing, trying to process where I was, how far they had taken me. There were no windows, no signs of the outside world. It was as if I had been swallowed whole by the earth. "You've seen things you weren't supposed to see," he continued. "Learned things you were never meant to understand. But you've barely scratched the surface." He stepped closer, leaning in, his eyes boring into mine. "The Watchers, the pyramids, Orion, it's all connected, yes. But not in the way you think." I tried to speak, to demand answers, but my throat was dry, my voice barely a rasp. He smiled faintly, as if amused by my attempt. "Humanity has always been guided, Dr. Kane. From the very beginning. Every leap in progress, every advancement, none of it happened by chance. The Watchers ensured it. They provided the spark, and we made sure the fire didn't burn out of control." He gestured around us, his voice growing more intense. "We've known about them for millennia. The Syndicate exists to maintain balance, to keep humanity moving forward without revealing too much too soon. Imagine the chaos, the collapse of society, if people knew the truth. That aliens have been here, among us, since the dawn of civilization." I shook my head, refusing to believe it. "You're lying," I croaked. "Am I?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "What do you think you've been chasing all this time? Ancient relics? Forgotten myths? No, Dr. Kane. You've been chasing the truth. And that truth is too dangerous for the world to know." He turned away from me, walking toward a door at the far end of the room. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." I had no choice but to follow. 2 guards released me from the chair and guided me down a long, narrow corridor. The deeper we went, the colder it became, the walls lined with strange machinery that I couldn't begin to understand. The hum grew louder, almost unbearable, as if the very structure around us was alive, thrumming with energy. The door at the end of the hall slid open with a hiss, and what I saw inside froze me in place. The room was massive, stretching far beyond the confines of what I had imagined. And in the center, suspended in a strange, translucent material, was something I couldn't comprehend. An object, or perhaps a being, that defied logic. It pulsed with a faint light, its shape constantly shifting, almost as if it existed in multiple dimensions at once. Surrounding it were rows of alien artifacts, technologies far beyond anything we had on Earth. "This," the Syndicate leader said, "is what the pyramids were built to protect. The Watchers left it behind, a remnant of their power. We've kept it hidden, preserved, waiting for the time when they would return." I stared at the object, my mind unable to fully grasp what I was seeing. It wasn't just alien technology, it was something more, something that felt alive, sentient. And then it hit me. The hum. The same hum I had heard beneath the pyramid, the same one that had followed me since. It wasn't a sound. It was a signal. "They're coming back," the man said, almost a whisper now. "And when they do, everything will change. But we can't let that happen, not yet. The world isn't ready." I felt a cold sweat break out across my skin. The Watchers, the pyramids, all of it, it wasn't just history. It was a warning. And the Syndicate had been controlling it, shaping our world from the shadows. Before I could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. The guards tensed, their eyes darting to the leader for direction. He cursed under his breath, then turned to me. "It's already started." The alarms kept blaring, a deafening wail that echoed through the cold metal walls. The syndicate leader stood frozen, his calm shattered as he realized what was happening. The thing in the chamber, the artifact, the being, whatever it was, it had triggered something. Maybe it had always been waiting for this moment. Maybe the Watchers were already on their way. "They're coming," he whispered again, but this time, there was no authority in his voice. Only fear. In the confusion, I made my move. One of the guards had stepped forward, his focus on the alarms, and in that split second, I lunged. My elbow hit him square in the throat, and he went down gasping. The other guard barely had time to react before I had grabbed the first man's weapon. I fired a shot into the ceiling, the noise echoing louder than the alarms. The syndicate leader flinched, and I bolted out of the room before anyone could stop me. I ran through the corridors, my heart pounding, my mind racing. There had to be a way out of this place, but more importantly, there had to be a way to get the truth out before they shut me down for good. The world had to know what I'd seen, what I had learned. The Watchers weren't just part of some ancient myth. They had been here, guiding humanity, and now they were coming back. And the Syndicate, for all their power, couldn't stop them. I stumbled into a control room, rows of monitors, blinking lights, security feeds showing different parts of the underground facility. A terminal sat in the corner, a faint glow coming from its screen. It was connected to something, maybe to the outside world, maybe to one of the secure networks the Syndicate used. This was my chance. I hacked into the system, my fingers trembling as I navigated through encrypted files and firewalls. Every moment felt like borrowed time. They would find me soon, and when they did, it would be over. But if I could just send one message, one piece of proof, maybe it would be enough. Maybe someone, somewhere, would pick up where I left off. I uploaded everything I had, the pictures, the translations of the hieroglyphs, the maps, the videos of the artifacts suspended in that strange, translucent material. I wrote out the details of my discovery, about the Watchers and their plan to return, about the Syndicate's role in hiding the truth from the world. My heart raced as I hit send. For a moment, I thought I'd succeeded. Then, just like before, the screen went dark. The entire system blinked out, the files erased, the network severed. I cursed under my breath. The Syndicate's technology was too advanced. They had blocked me again. But I wasn't giving up. I couldn't. I grabbed a backup drive from my bag, one that I had kept hidden from the beginning, and quickly started copying everything I had left. If I couldn't send the data online, I'd get out of here and find another way. The truth was too big, too important. It couldn't stay buried forever. Footsteps pounded down the hall behind me. They were coming. I could hear their voices, shouting, growing louder by the second. I grabbed the drive and sprinted out of the room, my chest tight with panic. The hallways twisted and turned, endless and identical, until I found an emergency exit. I shoved the door open and felt the cold desert air hit my face. The sky above was a deep, unbroken black, the stars like distant pinpricks of light. Orion was there, hanging low on the horizon, the same constellation the ancient Egyptians had worshipped, the same one that had guided the Watchers to Earth. I made it to the edge of the compound, where an old, abandoned truck sat covered in dust. The keys were still inside. As I drove into the night, the facility fading into the darkness behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. The Syndicate would come for me again. They always did. But this time, I had something they couldn't erase. As the miles stretched between me and the compound, I turned on the truck's radio. The static crackled for a moment before a voice broke through, a news report, talking about strange signals being picked up across the globe. Some were calling it interference from solar activity, others dismissed it as nonsense. But I knew better. The Watchers were returning. And when they did, the world would finally know the truth. The pyramids, the ancient texts, the alignments, they were all part of a plan, one that had been in motion for thousands of years. We were never alone. We had been watched, guided, shaped. The Syndicate had spent centuries keeping that knowledge from us, controlling what we knew, deciding what we were ready to understand. But they couldn't control it anymore. Not with what was coming. I pulled over to the side of the road, the desert stretching endlessly in every direction. The hum was there again, faint but unmistakable, vibrating through the ground beneath me. It wasn't a sound. It was a signal, a message. And this time, it wasn't just for me. It was for all of us. As I sat in the dark, staring up at the stars, I realized something. Maybe I was never meant to make it through this. Maybe the syndicate had always been one step ahead, letting me get just close enough to the truth without ever truly exposing it. But it didn't matter anymore. The Watchers were coming back, and the world would soon know what had been hidden for so long. The only question now was, were we ready for what they had to say? Hello, agents. Like these stories? Make sure to subscribe, and there's another story waiting for you right here.